We're glad to have you back. Stakeholders have said that the National Assembly must reconvene as a matter of urgency to reconsider and pass the supplementary budget and environment request made by the President before both chambers went on vacation.
And a lot has gone under the bridge at the moment. Defections, alleged impeachment plots, the funding of INEC for 2019 elections and other matters as well. The government has now expressed worry that if the lawmakers don't resume soon, there may be a government shutdown. As the National Assembly prepared to address these issues by cutting short its vacation.
And that's exactly the first question we'd like to ask our guest, the Honorable Mark Bila, who's joining us from our Abuja studio. He is a member of the PDP representing Gwe East and Gwe West Federal Constituency in Benue State. All right, it's good to have you on the show. Yes, that question that is burning in the minds of so many Nigerians. Is the National Assembly willing to reconvene to attend to burning issues of national concern?
Good morning. It's my pleasure to be on your show this morning. Now, it is very important to make it clear to Nigerians that the National Assembly has never been averse to addressing issues of critical importance to the country. Now, it's unfortunate that this administration likes to pitch the Nigerian people against the National Assembly. You can see that the leadership of the National Assembly were already preparing and planning to have a discussion about any critical issues that needed to be addressed when the government decided to lay siege on the National Assembly on Tuesday. So fortunately, after the World Press Conference the Senate President gave yesterday, a meeting was held with the chairman of INEC, because I believe the issue on the front burner right now is the issue of the supplementary budget, and which it is important for us to note that a budget was presented for INEC by this executive that was approved for 2018. It is gross incompetence in my own opinion, for the government not to have included the issue of the elections at that time. And like the Senate President emphasized yesterday, even during the year before the budget was finally passed, they had an ample opportunity to present whatever additional expenses they envisaged for the election, but that was not done.
Now, all right, well, you say that, of course, the government laid siege at the National Assembly on Tuesday, if memory serves me right. But even though that the operatives of the DSS were government agency, there is no evidence that it was the government that asked them to do what happened there. If not, the Vice President would not have taken the action that he took, would he?
Now, let us make it very clear. It appears as if your station is not privy to the statement by the sacked DSS boss that he acted on the instructions of the APC chairman and the chief of staff to the president. This was on his Twitter handle. So please, you can check that fact so that Nigerians will be provided with the facts on your station. This is a fact. This is a statement that has been already provided by the sacked DSS boss.
We're aware of that.
We're aware of it.
Yes,
we have already raised an alarm to the Nigerian people and the international community of the intention of this act to be carried out. And true to the script that they were already planning to play out, it transpired just the way we raised the alarm about. So it is very clear, very straightforward. The DSS boss does not report to himself. He reports to the president. He takes instructions from the president. And like they say in military parlance in a parade, he takes dressing from his principal, who happens to be the president. So you see, Nigerians should be very informed that this action was obviously taken by the executive in cahoot with the APC leadership led by the chairman.
Okay, well, the same Nigerians that you talk about actually are wondering whether all of these things that have been going on really factor in the interest of the average Nigerian who wants to gain or get the benefits of this hard fought and hard won democracy. It has recurred over and over again that, look, all of this quarrel, all of this fighting within the APC itself and between the PDP and the APC and what have you, really has no bearing on the Nigerian people, at least positively.
Now, it's important to note that some of us have no previous lineage of any sort in politics. We had a conviction to join the political sphere for the interest of the Nigerian people. Now, when you start to have a government that abuses the Constitution with impunity, like the recent circumstances where institutions under the executive act in a manner that is totally in contravention of the rule of law, then you start to realize that it is the incumbent that is not interested in the interest of the Nigerian people. And I like what your colleague said earlier when he referred to a Thomas Jefferson quote about when resistance is a duty. And if time permits, I'll read something else Thomas Jefferson also said about a despotism in governments and the responsibility of the people. For instance, when the EFCC acts in contravention of the law that sets it up to freeze the accounts of 2 state governments, and the government in power does not respond, and the Attorney General, who is the custodian of the law, does not know that it is illegal, when you have 8 members led to a House of Assembly to impeach a governor in contravention of the Constitution, and the IG of police is not sanctioned, you start to realize that who is it that is working against the interest of the Nigerian people? It is the responsibility of the Nigerian people to rise up and defend their democracy, which is enshrined by the Constitution. One begins to wonder, do the appointees of the government of the day understand and study the Constitution of this country?
Yes, well, that point is well taken. Let me come in very quickly, if you permit me. When you say that the Nigerian people should rise up, the job of the National Assembly, of course, has been well cut out. It's very clearly defined. It is for in the interest of the people. It is the National Assembly that goes out there and decides on laws that will be for the good governance of Nigeria and Nigerians. And so, is it not a case of the National Assembly not actually stepping to the plate? I mean, if Nigerians were to rise up in revolt, what kind of situation would we have?
Okay, thank you. Now, that's a very good point. Now, you see, it is clearly an example that has been set by patriotic members of the National Assembly who were the first responders to the tyrannical action of this government, when you saw very clearly we stood and resisted the truncation of our democracy on Tuesday. So now that is leading by example. And when it comes to the laws, you will now realize that when you have a despotic leader, the National Assembly has to also take decisive decisions, which when we even begin to act on certain quarters who are instigated by this same executive, now that is in the Nigerian polity, start to talk about political, inclinations or political reasons for such actions. But when I talked about the Nigerian people, I'm talking about the fact that you have a right to decide who your leaders are. We are getting to that stage now when you are provided with another opportunity to choose who will lead your country. And that is where the rising up of an average Nigerian is important, to take the fate of their future and their country in their hands. The National Assembly will not abdicate its responsibility. We have taken actions to call the heads of such institutions to order. But you see the very blatant display of disregard when they even fail to show up. And then the people they report to, another arm of government, the executive, takes no action against them. And that is where the Nigerian people now have to join hands with the National Assembly to decisively ensure that our democracy is not truncated.
Okay. All right, well, you're aware of the regular saying that when two elephants fight, it is the elements on the ground that suffer. Well, moving forward, how can we begin to ensure that the executive and the legislative arm of government work together to ensure that the mass of the people become the beneficiary?
Now, it is important to state categorically that there is a separation of powers in a democracy. Now, because of the plethora of military rulers in the past, it appears as if every executive, well, let me not say every, especially an executive that is led by a former military dictator, will perceive that there are certain excesses that are allowed. The first solution is for this executive to adhere strictly to the provisions of our Constitution and to uphold the Constitution and the rule of law. Because when they do that, then they can begin to relate appropriately with the National Assembly, who are those who are given the powers to enact or repeal laws. Now, that is the first thing that has to be done. And this is where I have made it clear in a previous interview that in the consideration and confirmation of appointees of this government or any other government in future, the Senate has to really be sure that these people are privy and are familiar with the provisions of the Constitution. For instance, I gave an example earlier. The EFCC chairman has to be called to order when he starts to freeze the accounts of state governments illegally and being influenced by politics. We also now have to have appointees who realize that they are appointed for the benefit of Nigerians, not the benefit of their principal and their party alone. When the executive starts to call its appointees to order, when they themselves start to show that they have the character and the integrity to be apolitical, then they can start to relate properly with the National Assembly, and then we can both symbiotically coexist and start to have the synergy that will take this country forward.
But
these are very key things that must be done.
There seems to be a trend right now where you have a National Assembly that is divided along the lines of pro-Buhari and pro-Senate President, or pro-Dogara for that matter. Would you say that the National Assembly by itself has been able to handle this democracy, that it happens to be the very heart of, talking about the legislature, is the heart of democracy? Has the National Assembly conducted itself in a way, really, that is becoming in terms of delivering laws for good governance and, of course, to push this democracy forward?
Yes, this 8th Assembly has been very above board and has performed better than any previous assembly. If you look at the record, the number of bills passed, the number of motions moved, the proactive decisions taken by this National Assembly, even with the pending Electoral Act, which will be a huge revolution in our electioneering process, which the President, incidentally, has refused to sign, you will see that this National Assembly has been working in the interest of the people. Now, let me make this very clear, and this takes me back to the onus being on the Nigerian people. The National Assembly itself is an institution. Who comes to the National Assembly depends on the decision of Nigerians. This 8th House of Assembly, in my own opinion, is still united, but of course you have elements who want to cry more than the bereaved, elements who believe that it is their prerogative to start to declare open support for the president because they want to curry favor. Now, it's unfortunate if they think that that is the best way they will operate, but we decide as a people who we want to represent us. So this National Assembly is determined to be united and is united. and we will stand on the path of the Nigerian people, and the constituents who elect who they send to the National Assembly should call their representatives to order if they believe that they are acting in contravention to what they believe is in the interest of the constituents, and the country as a whole.
Well, again, Nigerians have been worried over time about the income of members of the National Assembly. This is an area that Nigerians have really talked about so much. Not too long ago, early in the year, I suppose, where Senator Shehu Sani was on record as saying that they take home at least 13.5 million naira on a monthly basis. And then we have labor Nigerian workers who take home just 18,000 naira minimum wage. So how do we bridge this gap?
Okay, now let me make this very clear. It is important for Nigerians to know the facts, and this is an issue I'm happy you brought up, so you'll understand that there's a responsibility a legislature has, and there's a scope of work that is required. Now, many people make the mistake to think that Nigerian legislators earn more than every others in the world. A US senator, and you can check this fact, and I can provide you with the document, earns, in the same vein as what Shehu Sani said, over $2 million as allowances in a year. If you compare that to also the basic salary of an average American, then you can start to also make that kind of comparison. But that is why people in this office have responsibilities that they have to take care of. And it is important to note that these monies are not just for you to spend frivolously. They are tied to responsibilities of your office. They are tied to the requirements of your constituency office. They are tied to the travel you have to do. What he referred to is the allowance that is provided with a senator, which includes his travel allowance, his medical, whatever other bills he incurs when he's on an official assignment, and several other things. These things are also retired. What the executive doesn't always tell you is also what the ministers and others also get as their own stipend. It is not that we're trying to say that we are not concerned about what the average Nigerian worker earns. These are all things that we are all interested in trying to deal with, but there are responsibilities to certain offices that you have to appreciate and respect. But Nigerians are always made to attack the National Assembly as if that is where the problem is. Let me make this clarification very clear.
Yeah.
In a budget of 100% every year, the National Assembly's budget is only 1.5%. And that budget does not just go to members of the House and the Senate. It goes to the institution of the National Assembly, including the National Institute of Legislative Studies, the National Assembly Commission, the National Assembly bureaucracy, the performance of the functions of the National Assembly in terms of oversight, committee work, before you now talk about the salaries and the allowances of members and senators. But the executive every year sits on 98.4% of the money of Nigerians. But everybody always thinks that the National Assembly is the problem. And this is where we're getting it wrong. That is an institution like the judiciary that also receives statutory allocations on a first line charge. Because for the legislature, their own percentage is about 1% or so of every annual budget. Now, these are institutions that are required in a democracy. So it is not enough just to categorize it in terms of comparisons with the average worker.
We do appreciate your explanation.
That come with the offices that we're talking about here.
Yes, we understand that, Honorable Mark Bila, but are you saying that the National Assembly, the legislators have actually earned their pay? Would you say that with all of these expenses that you have reeled out and the different sectors or areas where these monies go, that the average Nigerian is able to say, yes, they have delivered as far as this is concerned?
Well, yes, definitely. They have delivered, especially considering the constraints that we have as a nation. Remember that the National Assembly still operates in the same society and the same environment like every average Nigerian. Unfortunately, in Nigeria, we do not have certain technological tools for the trade. We still have to compete with international markets in the tools we need to do our work, in the cars that we need to use to move around. And you need to realize that what Nigerians don't tell you is that it is still the National Assembly that makes Nigerians see any semblance of federal presence in their constituencies and in their societies. That is what a lot of people don't say. They don't tell you that it is still the National Assembly members that are harangued and harassed every day to pay school fees, to take people to hospital, and a lot of other things which ordinarily you would expect that every individual should take responsibility for. But these are the pressures that every member of the National Assembly gets.
All right.
We'll have to leave it there.
Their allowances are justified and their responsibilities are humongous, and that is why a democracy requires a legislature.
All right,
Honorable Mark doesn't want to practice the democracy.
Honorable
then
Mark,
you can start to revisit the issue.
Honorable Mark Bila, we thank you very much indeed for your time on the program. Thank you very much indeed.